Welcome to the PIO Podcast, a place for all things public information related for police, fire, EMS, and local governments. An open forum to learn, grow, and develop your PIO skills. I am Robert Tornabene, your host of this podcast. I am a public information officer with over 10 years in the field and 27 years of law enforcement background. Each episode, we will explore different aspects of the PIO profession. Join me weekly as we talk about everything public information related. If you would like to contact the show, please email me at thepiopodcast@gmail.com. Tell me how I'm doing, offer suggestions, or suggest a guest. Without any further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Today I'm interviewing Chris Hsiung, Deputy Chief, soon to be sworn in as Chief of Police of the Mountain View Police Department. Chris manages the day-to-day operations and is spearheading efforts in leadership development, succession planning, and maintaining the Mountain View Police Department's role as a progressive law enforcement organization in the 21st century. Chris is passionate about helping government, communities, connect and engage with each other. He's a digital media influencer, a conference speaker, and an innovator on the topic of social media, crisis management, community engagement, and digital strategy. Chris leads the City of Mountain View's Strategic Communications team, serves as the president for the Government Social Media Leadership Council. He's a committee member on the IACP's Police Professional Standards, Ethics, and Image Committee, and he's a commissioner on the City of San Mateo's Community Relations Commission. Without any further ado, here's Deputy Chief Chris Hsiung. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, how's it going? I guess it's good afternoon for you, huh?
It is good afternoon. Yes, it is. Let's just jump into this then. So your department, it's got a very robust program. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some of the stuff you guys have done. What do you think the catalyst was for this occurring in your department?
The history was, I want to say it's about 7 years now that we have been down this road of social media, like high-speed social media. And it started off as an experiment. At the time, I was a lieutenant, and I was in one of those special assignments. We call it, the administrative lieutenant. As we all kind of know, it's the dumping ground of all sorts of other things that no one else wants to do. So I was looking for a little bit of a, outlet. And being here in Silicon Valley, we thought, well, why don't we test this thing out called social media and see if it might do anything for us. Our department was actually already on social media, but the approach that we used back in 2013 pivoted because we started to kind of incorporate things that we take for granted now, which is like using our personality, using a little bit of professional sense of humor. And the more we started to go down that road, the more the community totally resonated with it. A real quick example is, I remember a tweet that we sent out. It was a picture of a traffic officer with a LiDAR gun just kind of monitoring a street. And the caption to the tweet was something like, hey, Mountain View, just so you know, we're out here, wink, wink. It kind of blew people's minds because it's not about revenue. It's not about making money or writing extra tickets. The fact is, if they slow down because of a traffic safety message like that, then we've accomplished our goals for that day.
Absolutely. How you guys, how is the group or your program staff? Was it just you initially, or is it bigger now?
So back then it was just me, and it was probably like 10% of my time, right? And the more we started to do it and kind of tweak and experiment, it took up 30, 40, 50%. And that's when we kind of understood that, okay, this is not sustainable for a lieutenant position to be doing. And so we looked at what we had in-house, and we reclassed a non-sworn position to basically become a public safety or public information officer / community coordinator, and brought on and kind of civilianized the position. So the first few years, it was someone who had been a prior police officer who went off into the private sector doing marketing communications. That was Shino Tanaka. She just hit it out of the park and was just phenomenal, kind of helping us get to the next step. And then about 5 years ago, we brought on Katie Nelson when Shino left. And Katie came to us from the media background. She worked for a local newspaper here and was like a crime reporter, and she took it to yet another level. So to answer your question, right now it is one full-time civilian position. That's Katie Nelson. And then I would, I guess, count as the management oversight of that. But she really does a ton of work to just make us shine.
Okay, and how many different social media accounts are you guys running?
Let's see, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube. Uh, I want to say that's all of them. I don't know,
Okay.
and we're kind of keeping our eyes open for other ones. And I don't know if you want to go down that road, but we often will just kind of experiment and watch a platform first before we actually jump into one. Because as you know, the second you do, you kind of add to your list of things that you got to kind of tend to.
Absolutely. I do know that there's so many different ones out there. Have you guys delved into any of the smaller platforms that are specific for different ethnicities or different cultures?
No,
Like
right. Mhm.
you guys have a fairly large Asian community there and a
Right.
Hispanic community.
Mhm.
There's some smaller platforms that are out there.
Yeah, so our department doesn't, but our city actually does. Like our city, because of the large Chinese population out here, they're pretty active on WeChat, and that's from the standpoint that our city has a multicultural linguistics team, basically interpreters. And so they'll take a lot of the city communications, and sometimes it's police department stuff, and translate it and put it out on like WeChat. And I've been amazed at how many, like in our Chinese community, are on that platform and how good of a kind of a conduit it is to reach them.
Has that been something that you found that created that bridge to those community
It
members?
definitely helps because, otherwise you have to rely on traditional means, going through like the local either Spanish or Mandarin media broadcast stations. But at that point, you're dealing with the whole Bay Area. And so something like a WeChat lets you have a hyper local. Yeah, so the big takeaway for most agencies is you have to know first your community, which most agencies are really good at, but also that each platform may be specific to specific communities. There's no one size fits all. So in our city, we have a large Chinese population, and an application like WeChat has been tremendously valuable to reach that community.
Okay, great. What do you think in regards to agencies just jumping into those platforms? What do you think the risks are? Because those are new areas. So what do you think the risks are to jumping into some of those when they haven't really felt them out completely?
If you don't do it right, you can sound totally off tone, and tone is really important. It's like if you go to another country or even a different part of this country, and you just don't know the cultural norms, and you come off and you just start talking or spouting your mouth off, you may very well likely offend somebody and not know it, right? So it's the same thing on
Absolutely.
the platforms. You're going to stand out unless you can learn to be a digital native of whatever that platform is. So in our department, we sound different when we use Snapchat versus when we're using Twitter.
How do you guys like using Snapchat? I've seen some of the agencies have used
Mhm.
Snapchat and they've got themselves into trouble.
Right.
And then like TikTok has gotten a couple agencies in
Mhm.
trouble as well.
Yeah, you have to define your boundaries. So obviously those are younger platforms, and the reason why we got onto those platforms is so that we would have a voice and a communication channel to a younger audience. But that does not mean that the maturity level of your content has to drop to a younger level, right? One of the
Mhm.
things I always say is no matter what, at the end of the day, you have to be professionally, just high bar, right? You cannot drop your standards just because you want to get likes or shares or something like that. So it's absolutely possible to be funny and well liked, but in a professional way. And the agencies that get in trouble are the ones that kind of forget that. Or sometimes, and I've seen it across the country, you have someone who maybe it's a very young officer who is really good at using those platforms, but they may not have the professional maturity of having been around and having to think, well, how is this going to make our department look if this other segment of the community sees what I just posted, right? So that's why sometimes you need a little bit of management oversight, a little bit of wisdom to apply to those types of operations.
Absolutely. So going towards, like, let's put our like future cap on here. Where do you think social media is going to go? What's that next big step for them, in especially law enforcement? Where do you think it's going to go?
Well, if we take a look at, let's say, the last few years where law enforcement is starting to mature a little bit, 6 years ago, we're out there teaching people, you need to use a little bit of sense of humor. You need to show a little humanity. By and large, most people get that now, right? So law enforcement's growing up. The social platforms are constantly growing up and changing. Right now, we're at a phase where it's an echo chamber, right? There is no middle ground. You either are left or you're right, you're red or you're blue. Departments are trying to navigate that. So in a large sense, we're still kind of preteen-ish as a country using social media. As a law enforcement profession, we're still learning. You look down the road 3 to 5 years, I think, hopefully, and here's my hope, in the same way that we all as human beings need to learn how to have dialogue and civil discourse with each other in person, there's got to be a way to do that online, right? No one's quite figured it out. Clearly, the Facebooks and Twitters of the world have not figured that out, because society has to mature a little bit there too. And along the way, what can we do in law enforcement is really stay true to who we are, stay true to our values, continually tell that story and that narrative of the men and women who give their all every day and come to work and try to do the best with what they're given, because it is a noble profession. We have incredibly great people working in all of our departments, and we're behind the eight ball a lot of times because what typically tends to surface is that very, very small minority of bad behavior that none of us likes, none of us would stand up to.
I agree. I think we have a lot of work to do as a profession. We have a lot to address for past things that have occurred, and I know over time that's going to get better. It's gotten better in my career. I've seen things from 25 years ago that people would be, just shocked to have happened today. And now you have a whole group of young people now that are coming into the profession that have different eyes, and I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, you said social media is a language and social media platforms are the dialogue. How are police moving into that? How are they going to take advantage of that?
So if you take the stance that every platform is its own dialect, let's take it back to what we do in real life, right? All of our departments have officers who are bilingual, and by virtue of them being bilingual, they understand the cultural norms, right? And I often use this example of, let's say there's a jurisdiction right next to you that you're going to annex, your department's going to take over, but it just so happens that that jurisdiction speaks a certain language. Pick whatever ethnicity you want. What's the most effective way for a department to get partnerships and trust in that community is to find those within their department that share the same values, speak the same language, right? And then you go in there and it might sound familiar, and it should, because it's called community policing. Now you got to do the same thing online as well. You when you're going to go into a new platform, you got to know the platform. You got to know what the cultural norms are. I hate to say it, but you can't have an old fogey like me trying to get in on Snapchat and try to sound like a teenager. It just isn't going to work. And maybe it can if self-deprecating and you kind of come off and that's your thing, and so maybe you can do it. But like in our case, Katie is phenomenal. She is what I would label as a digital native, right? So she can go into these platforms and she can speak and change her voice and tone to match exactly what the norm is on that platform. So we sound like we belong. We sound like we're just natives there, as opposed to, oh, here comes government, right? I like to contrast that with C-SPAN, right? What's the voice and tone of C-SPAN? No one, exactly. But a lot of times that's what government sounds like.
Right.
When we broadcast stuff, and it's not just law enforcement, it's all government. It's just like, we just sound boring. So we can go beyond that and sound a lot more relatable to everybody.
I agree. Great stuff so far, Chris. So let's talk crisis communications. That has been kind of where social media has really, really helped. Where do police departments need to improve on their crisis communications?
It's probably timing and response, and then buy-in from the top down. So let me explain that. It's getting better, but there still is an old school thought of, if a crisis breaks out in your jurisdiction, the first tendency of command staff or the chief or the sheriff tends to be, well, let's call a press conference. Well, we all know that a press conference can take upwards of 2 to 3 hours to set up, get talking points, microphones, media showing up, which used to be okay. But in the age of social media, when you have somebody literally live streaming from the scene and giving their own opinion on what's happening,
Right.
you got to get in there. I'd like to say within minutes, but conservatively, I tell most police departments at least 15, 20 minutes into that incident, you got to be there. You got to have a voice, because when you do, you are in the driver's seat of information. If someone else is live tweeting from that scene, you're basically playing catch up. You're doing rumor control. You can still have your press conference. Heck, I've seen some great examples of agencies out there that live tweet a critical incident, an active shooter going on, and then they have their press conference, and those tweets become your talking points for your chief or sheriff. So it's perfect, right? And the second part of that question, what else has to happen, is buy-in. So here's a litmus test for most police departments: is your PIO in the command post when something big's happening, or are they a few layers removed? You can't have that. You cannot have that delay of information. Katie is part of our command staff. She hears everything that I'm hearing, thinking. She basically knows my comfort zone on everything and can almost pre-craft statements. And she knows the difference of saying, I'm going out with this now, versus, hey, I want to go out with this. Are you okay with that? So those are all things that you can practice on a tabletop environment. And I like to tell leaders, okay, get a stopwatch out, go do a tabletop exercise, do your exercise, whatever the world is falling, and then go, oh, by the way, how long before you basically empowered your PIO to get out there in front of the message? And most of the times they don't even think about that, right?
It's still tough for PIOs, because
Mhm.
the chiefs are still, they want to control that message so much, and now I see so many mayors now are getting
Yeah.
into being the spokesperson, and they have limited training, and they have limited uh, ability to speak in front of the public, and they go and reveal things that they shouldn't be revealing, especially in criminal cases. That's a tough thing for PIOs. That's a very difficult thing to navigate.
Yep.
So let's talk about COVID-19. The pandemic really has thrown the world up on its edge, and I know you guys are getting hit particularly hard right now in California. We're getting hit pretty hard here in Illinois, and I know it's not you guys are not public health. So how are you guys, law enforcement? How are you guys dealing with informing the public, not just your agency, but what do you think law enforcement is doing overall?
From what I can tell, and this includes our department, is the general consensus in our region, in our state, and from like even across the country, is most of the role of law enforcement has been education and compliance, right? Because an enforcement posture, especially in kind of the police tension type of environment, just sets us up for failure if all we're doing is out there, writing tickets. So the real key there is to harness the trust that you've already built, because you've been engaging online with your community, and the tone that you take with your community when you're educating them about shelter in place, wearing masks, is that we're not ordering you to do this because we are the authority figure. It's more about, we're part of this overall family of, the city of whatever, and we're here to try to help you get through this together. We are part of this. We're in it with you, right? Those types of themes, I think, are important, as opposed to just being heavy-handed.
And I know that it is such a tough battle right now, because you have people in the community that they call when they see large gatherings, and they expect the police to come out and start writing tickets or making arrests, and then that's not going to solve anybody's problems.
Right.
That's going to just exacerbate it, and especially in today's times when we're looked at in law enforcement in a negative light as it is, to add that to it just makes it compounds the problem.
Right.
So, Chris, what do you think the public expects from PIOs? What do they expect us to be doing today?
It's interesting. I don't know if the public per se understands the role of the PIO as much as, say, a reporter or someone who interacts face to face more with the PIO. But I think the public demands almost instant information, right? Because somehow they're getting notifications of things happening in their neighborhood, whether it's on Twitter, on Facebook. There's a new app company out there called, I think it's Citizen, and it uses geolocation and AI, and if you subscribe to it, all of a sudden you get an alert that there's a crash, and literally that alert comes out within seconds of it being broadcast on the police radio. So do you think there's any chance that a PIO or command staff even knows that the alert's going out? No, because they're hearing it at the exact same time. And so it's difficult. The challenge for PIOs is to quickly but accurately get information to the public that's already starting to wonder what's going on, and so timeliness is really key.
I agree, and I do know that when we moved in our platform to putting out accident information, and it was real time. Literally, the second it got dispatched, it would go out on our social media with the location map. We started to get a lot of positive responses from the community because now they're seeing that stuff and they're navigating through traffic because they can now go around it. What I do notice is when we don't respond, that
Yeah.
the public gets a little upset. And I know that's probably one of the things they do expect us to make sure that we're responding to them. I think they all think that it's man 24/7,
Right.
365, and it's not. Um, so somebody new coming into the role of a PIO, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Uh, get ready. You're about to drink from a fire hose. But no, it's the real message is you might be alone in your assignment, but you are not alone in terms of colleagues across the country. So it's really important to get into a network of fellow PIOs, maybe fellow law enforcement PIOs. There's some phenomenal groups out there, like IACP has a PIO network, GSM, the government social media, has a network. And that's basically those types of professional affiliations. You can turn to them and say, here's what I've got. Does anyone have a policy about this? Has anyone ever dealt with that? And literally within minutes, as the, in the Facebook groups that I'm part of, someone jumps in and helps. And that's just the nature of PIOs, is help each other out.
Absolutely. One of the catalysts for the Illinois Public Information Officers Association started out as a conversation during a social media training class between myself and another officer.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this conversation. Why isn't there a network in our state like all the other associations have for PIOs? And so we're like, okay, well, we'll plan a meeting. Well, we put an alert out on the state network, and we had 75 people show up the following week.
Yep.
Haven't had 75 people at a meeting for anything else, like that nature. And literally now we're about 290 agencies and about
Wow.
400 people that are involved. And it's not just law enforcement PIOs, it's fire, EMS, FEMA, it's federal, it's local government that are all connected together. And it's grown dramatically. So, and we've actually deployed people to assist in incidents. We did a deployment in McHenry County when 2 officers were shot. One, they had a funeral for one, and we ended up going up and handling all their media while the entire department went to the funeral. And we did all their media inquiries for them.
Yep.
In other incidents, there's been advice. It's been just like you said. We had conversations with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to have those resources and to have that backup. Whether you sit behind somebody and you're helping them type a press release, or you're you might be responding to a message over a social media account. I think that's important for the new PIOs to realize that.
Mm-hmm.
So back in 2017, I watched a presentation that you had on WinX, and great organization, by the way.
Uh-huh.
And you made a comment, an enemy is one whose story we have not heard. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah. I found out about that quote when I was at a community meeting, and let me give you the backdrop of that. So it was a community meeting, cross section of the entire place, and the facilitator said, okay, we're going to do this exercise. Everyone find someone else in the room that you don't know and that doesn't look like you. You have 5 minutes each to tell your whole life story. You don't interrupt the other person. One person goes for 5 minutes, then it's the other person. And what you find out is this. So I was paired up with a self-described hippie protester from UC Berkeley in the 60s, right? Could not have been more different from this. At the time I was a captain, and civil servant and law enforcement for 20 something years. But here's the thing is you learn that you're both human. You learn that you've both suffered and been through trials and been through issues and good points, high points, very low points. And that's the takeaway for humanity is until you break down those walls and have a chance to talk to each other, it is possible to see each other as enemies, but that quickly goes away if you take those extra minutes, and this was only 5 minutes, to understand that we're all humans first, and no one's perfect. And so I think society as a whole has a lot to learn from that as well. Society and law enforcement is that, even in law enforcement, we have a tendency to talk about the other side or those people or whatever, right? Let's be leaders like we often are and take the initiative and break down those barriers, right? Find those opportunities, have those conversations, be a little, open up a little bit, and you'll find that there's some middle ground. And that's it. You're not going to change and solve world peace overnight, but that's just it. You just keep chipping away and start building those bridges. And I think society will benefit from that as a whole.
I agree, Chris. Thank you for expounding on that. I appreciate that. It was a great, your presentation speech and that presentation was awesome. And I wanted the other officers and the other PIOs to hear your perspective on that. So thank you very much.
Sure.
So one thing that the listeners that are going to hear this podcast, one thing that you could give away as a takeaway for them today?
It's a constantly evolving field, but again, like we talked about earlier, you're not alone. Stay connected and you'll hear from fellow PIOs on what's changing, what's a best practice, and just stay kind of tuned in. It's an ever evolving cycle of learning. Stuff that we used to teach about doing whatever on Twitter 5 years ago is so different than now because the platforms themselves are constantly changing. So, there is really no standing still in this industry.
Absolutely. Some of the hardest work I ever did was as a PIO by far. No breaks and scenes and things like of that nature. All right, simple stuff. These are fun. One person that you'd like to sit down with and have lunch, dead, alive, and why?
I'll pick one that's alive. Simon Sinek. I don't know if you follow
The Ultimate Game. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
A lot of me growing up as a law enforcement leader has a lot to do with kind of just following his books and his talking points. They just resonate. They really work, not just in law enforcement, but really, in personal life as well. That starts with why, or is that?
Yeah, no, that's the new one. Together is better. It's,
okay.
It's a gift, but
got it.
I have the other one too, but
yeah. So he's a neat guy. He's a humble guy, but he's always spot on. And so I know he's spoken at IACP 3 times now, which a lot of credibility, right?
Yep.
That means the industry respects him as well.
I agree. And when I hear close friends of mine that are not in the industry and they're following him and reading his stuff, and my wife actually mentioned him the other day, and I was like, okay, I must be on the right track with things. That's great.
Right.
Last good book you read, and it's probably Simon Sinek.
That probably was. The irony here is someone else just asked me, hey, give us a list of the books you read, and my answer to them was, it's 2020. My hair's been on fire for I don't know how long. I actually haven't had a chance to read a book this year yet. So, but if I go back, it was probably Leaders Eat Last, or,
okay.
One of those. So, yeah.
I know the last one I read that actually had time to read that in 2020 was It's Your Ship.
Mm-hmm. That's a great one too.
Yeah, it's a really good book. Yep. Favorite sport and favorite team.
Man, that's a funny one too. I used to follow it a lot more, but I got 4 kids. And so hobbies and sports took a back seat quite a few years ago. I haven't quite had the chance to get back into it. I did, we're out here in San Francisco, so for a while I followed the Niners, but I'm more of like an old school Niners fan, and that's back in the Joe Montana, Jerry Rice days. Since then, yeah, haven't had much time to jump into that.
Okay. Now, what's your age range of your kids?
From like junior high all the way up to a senior in high school. So,
okay. So
yeah.
Similar to what I had several years ago, I had 3 in high school simultaneously.
Oh man.
2 were in wrestling. I literally spent 6-7 years in wrestling tournaments every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter was involved in dance and all kinds of other stuff. So there was never a weekend or a weeknight that wasn't some event.
Yep.
that so yeah, absolutely. Favorite food?
Oof. Okay, so my do have a COVID pastime, and that is I bought a smoker. I bought a Traeger.
Nice.
And man, barbecue. I was barbecuing, grilling before that, but smoking meats and stuff has been kind of, so yeah, a good rib roast or ribs or, pulled pork. It's just been fun because it's my outlet at this point. Can't go anywhere else. So I'm going to sit in my backyard.
It's amazing what this year has done. And I cannot wait for this vaccination to come out and, and maybe get us back to norm by June, maybe.
Right.
I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Anything else any other things you want to impart to us tonight?
No, I'm out there and I'm part of that PIO network. So, I don't know if you're going to list my Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever, but, here's the open invitation for all the PIOs out there that hear this, please connect and please reach out if you need anything 24/7. I go with the mantra. When I first became a detective, one of the senior detectives told me, hey, if another agency calls for help, you drop everything and you help them. That's just the culture, right? And that carries through all the way to today. So you're a PIO out there, you need help. I'm going to drop everything and I'm going to help you.
Chris, that's awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate you sitting through the 2020 gremlin that got me. I appreciate you doing this. This is going to kick off the beginning of this podcast. I just lined up Ashley McDonald from NIOA. She's going to come and speak. And I've got Rebecca Mina. She works for DC Homeland Security. She's going to come and speak. And I'm lining them up as I go. So you're kicking it off for me. I appreciate everything that you did. And everything that you do have done for the PIOs and social media particularly. You've really set the bar for everybody to aspire to, and I hope that they get a chance to backtrack and connect with you so that they can they can learn a little bit more from you, because you have so much knowledge and background that they need to jump into that.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the honor of being a guest on your show.
Thank you, Chris. Have a great day, and good luck with taking over the reins.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you to Deputy Chief Chris Hsiung from the Mountain View Police Department. Next week, we will have Rebecca Mina from the Department of Homeland Security, DC Public Affairs Deputy Director. That's it for the week. We appreciate you listening, commenting, and emailing the show. Share this podcast to help us grow. I will be posting new content weekly, sometimes daily, so check back regularly. Until next time, be safe.